Um, okay, so I'm guessing neither of you were here last week, so you don't have any questions about last week. Um, so we will get started then. Um, Today we are doing what I call creating questions because, of course, that's what a survey is all about, asking questions. Um, so I'm going to create a new project and survey and get started. Um, and as you can call it whatever you like. You can put it in any folder you want. And if you forget to put it in a folder, if you don't have folders, it's not a big deal. You can always move it later on. So it's not a big deal if you happen to put it in the wrong one or don't put it in any. Most of the time, you'll be starting with a create a blank survey project, but you can import uh, from a project. Somebody at another institution can export it as it says here, a QSF file, and then import it. We'll be talking about that in a couple of weeks, in a few weeks, actually. You can copy a survey that you already have or use a survey from your library. But as I say, most of the time you'll probably be starting from a blank survey. Now, take a minute to go through its uh, things. Um, and by default, you get one question to start off with. It's always this multiple choice question. Um, Before we really get into this, I want to uh, impress upon you the importance of planning. Um, don't just say, oh, I need to do a survey, and then just sit down in Qualtrics and start typing and creating things. You can do it in Word, you can do it in a Google document, whatever, or even just write it on a piece of paper. Um, Plan out what you want to do. Um, Plan out and type out at least drafts of your questions. You can always copy and paste from Word or anything else um, into Qualtrics, so you don't necessarily have to retype everything. Unfortunately, you can't import a Word document into Qualtrics and have it create all the questions. But as I say, you can copy and paste back and forth. Uh, do drafts of all your questions and possible responses and take a good look at it, put in notes as to whatever kind of skip and display logic you might want, any survey flow things you might want, etc. And that will help you a lot later on, especially if you have a long survey. If you're just asking 5 questions, it's obviously not a big deal. Uh, But the longer and more involved your survey is going to be, the more important it is to plan out what you're going to do. So as I say, when you start your question, when you start your survey, it gives you this one question to start off with, and you can certainly change that. Come up here to question type, multiple choice, text entry. As you'll see, the other things down here change depending on what type of uh, question you have. I'm just going to go, I'm not going to talk about each and every one of these, uh, but you see there's a whole bunch available in here. Um, Now, I shouldn't say a lot, but several of these questions are not accessible, like heat map and hotspot. Uh, they do not conform to accessibility guidelines. Last week, I showed everybody what's known as the new survey taking experience. And I suggested that you turn this on right away before you start creating anything. We're going to come back here. And now you'll see this list is different. That hotspot and heat map are not in there. And now you do have a calendar type question, which is only available in the new survey taking experience. The new survey experience is better for accessibility. It has a newer, I guess, interface to make it easier for a respondent to answer the questions. And that's always a good thing. You want to make it easy as possible for them to answer so that they do answer. Usually when you're doing a survey, your first question will actually be not a question, but just instructions, an introduction of some type, maybe your consent statement, etc. This will show up in your data as a column of data, and it will just be yes or no, 0 and 1, as to whether or not this was shown to the respondent. And of course, if it's your consent statement, it will be shown. As you can see, different types of content can go into that. Response validation really doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm going to show you some more about that when in a more reasonable question for it, because this doesn't require a response from the respondent. So let's go back to multiple choice. That's the most common type of question. We'll go down here. Allow one answer is what's also known as radio buttons. You can click here, and now it's, a click, check all that apply. You can change the number, increase or decrease the number of choices. Let's go to 5. And they also have suggested choices. So you can do agree, disagree, above and below average, happy, unhappy. So you can see there's a whole bunch in here. And it certainly makes your life a lot easier in creating these questions. You don't have to type each of these out. You can reverse the order. And you see it goes from extremely happy to unhappy, and you redo it, and it just changes the order. Show all, show first and last. It's best to show all. The alignment. Qualtrics really makes it very easy to reformat your questions. Let me show you this edit multiple for a moment. Well, actually, first, when you do create your questions, you certainly don't have to use the suggested choices. You can type anything else you want in there. Say 1, 2, etc., all the way through. You'll see there's a little drop-down box here. Allow text entry, rich content editor. You've seen these. It just lets you do some nicer formatting. And put a graphic in there. Exclude from analysis. That's only within Qualtrics itself. If you're doing reports and things in Qualtrics, it will exclude that particular value, not the question, but that particular value or response when creating the bar charts or whatever else you're doing. Pipe text is a way of getting other information into the response. We'll be talking more about this next week, I think, but this can be very useful. Display logic, we'll be talking about some more next week as well. Just a quick show you. You can add the logic. And what's nice is whenever you're doing any kind of logic in Qualtrics, it always works the same. But here it makes more sense. Allow text entry. So this could be an other or, extremely happy. That kind of a question. And of course, you can change the question text. And there's a rich content editor for that. And you can put pipe text in there as well. As I said, we're going to do more of this next week or the week after. Excuse me. One thing I do want to show you is right here. It says Q1. By default, Qualtrics numbers the questions Q1 through Q however many you create. If I take question 2 out, see, this is still question 3. And if I were to move this question up, it's still question 3. Now, accessibility guidelines say that you should display the question numbers to the respondent. That's okay, except if you're doing any kind of skip logic or display logic or randomization of the questions, Qualtrics will not renumber them on the fly. So if you're doing if you have 10 questions that you're randomizing, the numbers that are displayed to the user will be randomized, and that confuses screen readers. So whether or not you show the question numbers is a judgment call. You can come up here and it's auto number questions. The default is a sequential. There's block. We're going to be talking about blocks later on. But this would be question 1, block 1. Internal ID or it's a behind the scenes ID for each and every question. I don't know why you would use this. There might be some JavaScript programming or some other API that would want to use the internal ID rather than the regular questions. Usually you're going to want to do something sequential. You can change the prefix from Q to, as it says, up to 4 characters. So you can say VAR. You see how it changed up here. Skip export tags that I have defined. I'm going to show you that in a second. By doing this, I'm going to click apply, and you see it's Q3, Q1. Click apply, and it goes through, and now it's var1, var2 in proper sequential order. What can be very useful is if you come here to the question number, you can change that. And you can change it to just about anything. And this is what Qualtrics kind of refers to as the export tag. What this really is it translates into a column header in Excel or a variable name in SPSS. And so when you download your data later on, if you download it to Excel, this will be the column header for this particular question or the variable name in SPSS. I often recommend doing this because it makes, when you see that in your Excel spreadsheet or SPSS data tab, it makes a little more sense than Q1, Q2, Q3, etc. Also, if you are using a published survey, say, a lot of psychology measures, sociology, you can buy or download or use somebody else's survey. And oftentimes with that comes a program, like an SPSS program, to analyze the data. You'll want to make your question names or variable names the same as what's in the programs, so that when you download your data, you can just go ahead and run the SPSS program that you got with the survey. Otherwise, if you left this at Q1, Q2, etc., and they have different names, you're either going to have to go into your data and rename all the variables, or, which I absolutely do not recommend doing, editing the program that they sent you to change the variable names in that. And as we saw a moment ago, the export tags. It says skip export tags that I have defined. So if you've defined some of these and not all of them, Qualtrics won't go through and change the ones that you have defined yourself. My suggestion is either define all of them or define none of them. Try not to have a mix, because, of course, later on, when you want to download your data, you want that to be as orderly and as usable as possible without having to go in and clean a lot of stuff up later on. Just looking at my notes here. I had mentioned that you can copy and paste either from Word, a Google Doc or, say another web page, a lot of times when you do that, there's computer code behind everything, and sometimes that gets copied in as well. Uh, and so what you need to do is come up here, is it under review, and do script formatting. That will take out all the Microsoft Word or whatever else HTML code that's behind it and leave you with some plain text. And then you can go back in and of course use the spacing on the name, the rich content editor to reformat it to make it look nice. Just looking at my notes here. I got new glasses, so I have to get used to where I have to look at things. Um, you know, for all of them, you can do add requirements, and it's force a response or request a response. Request means if they don't answer it, it will stop and say, could you pretty please answer this question? If they still click submit, then it will uh, just go on. Force response means they can't move on to the next page until they answer the question. And you can do validation. You can select whatever question you want, and you see it shows you the different choices you have. Is selected, is not selected, is displayed, is not displayed. Obviously, if you're doing skip and display logic for a particular question or response. Now, the logic is this will, as it says, the validation will pass if this condition is met. So if the person selects choice one, then the condition is met and they're okay and they can move on. If they select anything else, then it does not pass. Whatever message you can do, a save message. They have a bunch. That you can use. I'm just going to save that for now. Click save. Come up here to preview. This is very useful. I'll go through more of this in a moment. And see, there's a little asterisk to say you have to answer this. And remember, it's question choice one to pass. It comes through, and you get this. And this, this issue and these things are all part of the new survey experience. And so your user can click on go to the first issue. This is very short, but if you have 20 questions on the page. And so now I can come back here and everything's good. And if you look over here, there's a little star and says this question has response requirements. And your validation can be based on other questions. Um, choices, answer range. Uh, Here, custom validation. You can get uh, fairly fancy with this. So you can do and, or, and then move to a new logic set. We'll talk about more about that, but that's like using parentheses in an SQL statement or database query. Um, Pretty much if you need to do that, then you probably want to rethink how you're doing the validation and the questions. Um, you really don't want to get more than two or three levels into this because then it starts getting really complicated and confusing. And then when you go to test this, you got to test it a whole bunch of different ways to make sure that it all works. So if you start getting into some really complicated validation here, my suggestion is stop, go get a cup of coffee, take a nap, take your dog for a walk or something, and then come back to it later on and rethink it. Of course, you want to keep it simple so that it works. And we'll be seeing more of this logic stuff as we go along in different contexts. We'll be doing display and skip next week and carry forward. Um, Randomization is in next week or a couple of weeks. Um, we'll come back to recode in a minute. Default choices is exactly what it sounds like. So this is chosen by default. You can undo that as well. Recode values. By default, as you create these questions, I guess behind the scenes is the best way to put it. Qualtrics will number these one, as you see, 1, 2, 3. When you download your data to Excel or SPSS, it will be 1, 2, or 3. Sometimes that's not what you really want. Let's say pick, yeah. But you don't necessarily want this as 1, 2, and 3. Let's so when you download your data, in the data, it will say 1, 2, and 3, not 1990, 2000, or 220 by default. But what you can do is come over here to recode values. And you see here it says 1, 2, 3. If you click on recode values, you can now change this to 1990, 2000, and 2020. So now when you download your data, instead of in that column or in that variable, it says 1, 2, or 3, it will say 1990, 2000, 2020, which can make your data analysis a lot easier and more proper, correct, depending on what you're doing. Variable naming. This is kind of weird because um, you think of variable naming as the name of the variable, as I have here, first Q. The column header in Excel or the variable name as it's called in SPSS or SAS or Stata or anything else you're using. But what it really is, at least in what SPSS and other programs call it, is a value label. So I can say 900. Now, if you download this to SPSS, this here will be your value label. If you download it to Excel, you are given a choice in Qualtrics whether to download the value or the label. And as we go through in a few weeks to downloading your data, this might make a little bit more sense. Often too, if you use a published survey or psychological measure, they'll have you do different values in here than the default 1, 2, 3. And so you want to use the recode values so that when you download your data, it's the way they're expecting it. Are there any questions about that? If you have questions at any time, just speak up.
I have a question regarding an earlier part that we talked about.
Mhm.
So it seems that Qualtrics has a preset and pretty comprehensive list of like possible answers to certain questions. But let's say
Yes.
I have a custom set that I want to repeat over more than once. I feel like there might be a way to like create a preset multiple set answer and then plug it in? Is that a possible choice when creating these questions?
Yes, you have a couple of ways of doing that. One would be to use the edit multiple because you can copy and paste into this. So if you have a list of, let's say, 20 things, you don't want to have to keep typing them out in each question. You can copy
Hmm.
and paste them into here. Um,
Okay.
the other thing you can do is create that question and then save that question to uh, your library. And that's something we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks. Um, and then just when you go to create a new question, import it from the library. The other thing you can do is just come over here and copy the question and then change, make the few changes that you need to do. That's probably the easiest thing. Just create the question once and then copy it.
Okay, that's clear to me. Okay, that
Okay.
makes more sense. Thank you.
And move the question, copy it, replace something from the library, add a page break. We'll be talking about how that works later in a couple of weeks. Preview the question. It just shows you what the question looks like. That one question, as opposed to this preview. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. You can add a note, and this note is seen only by you or your collaborators. It does not get displayed to the respondents. So, it's good, if you need to talk back and forth with a collaborator, if you just want to make a note to yourself about something. And of course, you can delete the question as well. Of course, as you create things and you're going along, you want to preview it. Make sure that things are working the way you think it does. Click here, you get what it looks like on a phone. If you have a long survey, you don't necessarily want to have to keep going through, all the parts that you've already tested and know work. So you can place a bookmark, and then you can go to that bookmark and work from that point on. Under tools, you can ignore validation. That can be helpful once you've working on your validation as you go along and you're testing later parts of your survey. You have to make sure that all the validation is there and the whole bit. You can just ignore the validation that you know works already and just keep going on to the new stuff. View the published version. We haven't published it yet. What you see here in the preview is still technically a draft. Or you can scan the QR code, and so you can point your phone at it and look at it on your own phone. You can also share the preview. So brand internal only means people only in Syracuse University. Public is anybody can see it as long as they have the link. If they don't have the link, then they're not going to be able to find it. But this is a good way to get your friends to help take a look at it. And that's always a good idea, to get other people to try it out and look at it as you're going along. And you can even restart it. I don't use that too often. It's not really going to change much unless you're trying out some validation. Now, as you probably noticed, I click preview here and you get a sample, a preview of your survey. As you're going through and you're doing validation, especially once you get into doing survey flow, sometimes the changes you make in that survey flow don't necessarily get, I guess, propagated to the full version of the survey. And so you need to publish. And publish is really a misnomer. It doesn't mean that everybody in the world is now going to be able to complete your survey. They can't do it unless they have the link. But what publish does is it saves everything together. So any new skip and display logic, any validation, any survey flow that you've been doing, it all gets saved and put in there. And you can copy the link and that's fine. Okay. Now you see up here it says published. But as I say, that's kind of a misnomer. People get a little worried. Oh, it went out to all my respondents. No, it hasn't gone anywhere. It really should say save rather than publish. That's from uh, like 10 years ago. Mm, I think that's it. Any other questions?
I just have a side question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You were talking about the coding, the numerical versus the recoding the values, the
Hmm.
variable naming and the recode. Is this something that would, once you try to extract the responses, it'll be something like a numerical? Because I don't use SPSS, I use R. Would it be something like, would I pull the variable naming being like a naming of the variable itself versus like a numerical assignment to the responses? Is that how
Yeah, this is the numeric assignment to the response.
Mhm.
So first Q would be in R. I don't use it very much, but I know they have variable names. Your variable name is first Q. And then R doesn't use value labels like SPSS does. So it would just be these values here.
Mhm.
Um, and as I say, when you first create this, uh, these recode, when you create these responses, Qualtrics numbers them one through however many you have. And that's not necessarily what you want. It might be fine, in which case you don't need to recode the values. Um, but if you remember when I first created this, this was 1, 2, 3, and it was one, two,
Yes.
three here.
Mhm. Okay, makes sense to me. And you said that if I wanted to extract the data, you could either do either or, and it will give you the option if you wanted to do very based on variable naming or based on values assigned to these questions.
Yeah, let me show you if this comes up quickly enough. Sometimes when you first come into your data, it takes a little while. Don't know.
Mm,
So you see here is CSV, which would be, good for R. You have export values or export labels. The values
mhm.
would be those numeric parts, the 1990, 2000, 2020. The export labels would be where I wrote it out in words.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, complete makes
Okay.
sense to me.
And typically you're going to want the values. Most of the time you're going to want the values rather than the labels.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay, good. Um, any other questions?
Not on my end. No, I appreciate the time and effort put into this.
Okay, no problem. Be here again next Thursday at 3 o'clock.